Goodluck Jonathan with comparison to Rountable, right? Because Goodluck Jonathan's from that region. Do people think that they're going to get more benefits now, or do they think it's going to be worse? And I like the way you brought up Boko Haram towards the end of the paper, and if you think that this kind of approach can be applied someday in the north of Nigeria with Boko Haram. Thanks.
Thank you. I share Leonardo. What should I do now is to ask. I suppose that we have some time probably to, yes.
I think can apply to other regions of West Africa. When I think of the Delta, I think of a place that should be exhausted for so many generations of conflict, from the slave trade to the palm oil conflicts to crude oil. And I was wondering if you could say something to us about a region that has lived through such a protracted period of different kinds of conflict, and what do you think that's done to the people who live there that makes it a special case?
So the number one question, has there been a change with Jonathan and the irregular of the past regimes? Well, I'll say yes and no. Number one, when Yar'Adua came on the scene, let me put it this way. Jonathan was Yar'Adua's vice president before the demise of Yar'Adua. And Yar'Adua brought this issue of amnesty, KMGTR, on board because of his passion, of the Niger Delta region and the need to resolve the crisis. However, with the demise of Yar'Adua, it became very important for Jonathan to push it forward. Just like what you said, he is from the region, and the people actually expect more from him. Well, to this extent, I would say yes, he has done what he can do to ensure peace and stability in the region. But the problem is with the people he has actually given the job to. For example, we have the Amnesty Office in the region, and the Amnesty Office is expected to actually implement the GTR process. But from my paper, it will be realized that a lot of issues are really have been brought to the fore by the so-called amnesty. But I really don't know whether Jonathan is aware of these problems, or maybe he's also a collaborator with them. Because this program has now been politicized and turned into personal interest. But much more importantly is the issue of community reintegration. We have observed that nothing is being done to these to the communities where crude oil has actually affected till date. Because based on the interviews I had with the ex-militants, most of them are still saying they will go back to the bricks. They will bring back their weapons and they will still fight the government if nothing is done to their communities. I still called two of them on phone about 2 weeks ago, and they are still telling me that nothing has been done to their communities, even though we have a community known as the remediation community to bring about development in this oil-rich region, oil-rich areas, but nothing has been done. So to this extent, I would say no, Jonathan has not actually done anything. Rather, the issue of politics in Bayelsa State and the issue of Boko Haram, they are really budgeting or maybe his government. Then to this issue, whether the same process can be applied to the Boko Haram, it will be very difficult to also apply this process to the Boko Haram for several reasons. One, it is based on Boko Haram is based on the north, and the issue we have with Boko Haram is totally different from the issue we have with the Niger Delta militants. The Niger Delta militants have the major cause, and the cause is we've been degraded for a very long time, and we need to restore us to our former glory where we could go to our farms and we could produce, we could get robust produce at the end of the day. But for the Boko Haram, what are they actually fighting for? They have no agenda. And if you look at the meaning of Boko Haram, it means no formal education. That's another problem. If you say that they should actually implement the DTR process in the in the northern region, especially with the Boko Haram, then what would be the process? What would be the methodology? Since they don't want formal education, it becomes a very problematic way out of the program, way out of resolving the crisis with the Boko Haram people. But I would say that outside this city, a lot can be done by the government. You know, when we look at the issue with the several crises in Nigeria, it borders on the failure of the state, you know, to bring about employment opportunities, to bring about education, health, and so on and so forth. So if something can be done in this regard, not only to the Boko Haram or to the Niger Delta, but to the youth generally in Nigeria, I believe there will be stable peace in the country. Then talking about the protracted, I didn't get that very well. Maybe you can.
There's a long history of conflict in the area for hundreds of years.
Okay.
What is do you think it makes it a special case, or do you have suggestions for places? There are other places in Africa like that.
Well,
Does it make it a special problem? Are the people tired, for example, from?
I would say, yeah. Looking at the Niger Delta region, just like what you said, it's a special region because of these conflicts over the centuries. First and foremost, the slave trade, and I think it affected all parts of Africa. Then coming back to the issue of palm oil, when Europeans felt they should have legitimate trade with the African continent, and I think it also borders on all African continent too. Then looking at the post-colonial period, the issue of crude oil, it also affects major parts of Africa. So I think it's more of an African case.
Okay.
Yes, it's not only in there, it's just that the scenario is more visible in the Niger Delta region.
I think for to know to Professor Didier to answer the question that we have put a moment ago.
Je voudrais répondre à certaines questions qui ont été soulevées ici par rapport à l'exposé. La première question consiste à dire est-ce que le phénomène d'ACMI aujourd'hui ne pourrait-il pas renforcer le pouvoir militaire comme l'a été dans la guerre du Sahara occidental. Effectivement, d'ailleurs, quand Ould Abdelaziz a été élu dans des conditions un peu douteuses pour l'opposition, il y avait un problème de légitimité parce que l'opposition n'avait pas reconnu sa victoire. La communauté internationale était un peu réservée sur le déroulement des élections, même si les observateurs avaient dit qu'il n'y avait pas de fraude massive pour contester les résultats. Mais l'engagement du pouvoir militaire, Abdelaziz a pris un engagement et aussi des actions militaires qui lui ont permis d'obtenir des résultats dans le combat contre le terrorisme international. C'est à partir de ce moment-là que, par exemple, la France a soutenu son action. Les autres puissances occidentales, comme les États-Unis, se sont rangées aussi du côté de la France pour dire, voilà, peut-être que de par son action contre ce mouvement, contre ce terrorisme international, c'est le seul président, parce que les autres ont échoué dans l'action, parce qu'il n'agissait même pas au temps de Sidi Ould Abdelahi, il niait la situation dramatique, les réalités et l'enjeu que cela constitue en matière de déstabilisation, et non seulement pour la Mauritanie, mais pour les autres pays. Et à partir du moment où le président Ould Abdelaziz a mené des actions qui ont produit des résultats, donc il a changé de stratégie, puisqu'avant, la Mauritanie était victime de l'agression au niveau de ses frontières de 1960. Et maintenant, compte tenu de l'enjeu, compte tenu de la situation, compte tenu aussi de l'aide extérieure, surtout de l'aide de la France, puisqu'il y a un centre de formation pour les officiers, pour les militaires qui sont formés, donc un bataillon formé pour simplement lutter contre l'ennemi. Alors, à partir de ce moment-là, il y a un changement à l'état de position de la France à l'endroit de Ould Abdelaziz, même si les conditions conditions de son élection n'étaient pas claires pour certains. Donc, renforcement bien sûr de sa légitimité en fonction des résultats qu'il a obtenus dans cette lutte contre le terrorisme international. En matière de comparaison, est-ce que vous pourriez comparer la situation des militaires qui sont arrivés au pouvoir, des coups d'État, avec d'autres pays comme le Ghana ou le Mali? C'est vrai, on pourrait les comparer, mais la situation en Mauritanie est différente. Au Ghana, l'armée a intervenu pour restaurer la démocratie. Raoult, on l'a vu combien de fois il est revenu quand la démocratie était menacée. Mais ce n'est pas le cas pour la Mauritanie. L'armée n'est pas intervenue, officiellement intervenue pour rectifier, ce qu'ils disent, c'est leur terme, pour rectifier la situation. Mais c'était une situation aussi démocratique qui était là parce que le président a été élu. Même s'il y a un manquement au niveau démocratique, on peut trouver des mécanismes de résolution de ces questions. Par exemple, le dépôt de motion de censure, donc des mécanismes institutionnels existent qui pourraient régler donc cette situation de confrontation entre l'exécutif et le législatif. Donc cette situation-là, je veux dire, l'arrivée des pouvoirs mauritaniens, l'arrivée des militaires au pouvoir, c'est une situation qui perdure et qui reflète les réalités politiques mauritaniennes. À partir du moment où jusqu'à présent c'est l'armée, il y a une implication, comme disait un collègue mauritanien, une implication entre les logiques militaires et les logiques civiles et surtout la classe politique traditionnaliste et la classe politique aussi des affaires. Donc il y a une convergence d'intérêts et les militaires jusqu'à présent restent maîtres du jeu en matière de contrôle de la gestion politique. Et je ne sais pas combien de temps ça va durer, mais c'est relatif aussi au comportement des hommes politiques. C'est-à-dire qu'ils subissent depuis l'arrivée des militaires, ils ne font que subir la situation, à réagir seulement. Ils n'ont pas cette initiative à prendre la situation en main et de jouer le rôle dans un système démocratique où les professionnels politiques interviennent pour instaurer la démocratie, participer donc à la vie politique. Je termine juste deux termes qu'il a abordés. Le terme de nomadisme politique, où on parle aussi de transhumance politique. C'est des changements qui existent. Un homme politique, il ne trouve pas. Donc ça rentre dans le cadre de la gestion néopatrimoniale et du clientélisme. Les hommes politiques changent en fonction des propositions alléchantes. On le voit, on les débauche d'un côté. Mais avant, je disais que c'était une particularité africaine. Mais quand je me suis rendu compte, même en France, ça existe. Claude Besson a changé. Il était socialiste, il est parti collaborer avec l'URP, avec Sarkozy. Donc ce changement existe. Mais chez nous, c'est flagrant et ça traduit un état d'esprit de la conception qu'on a du politique. La politique se base pour se nourrir, pour faire de l'argent. Mais c'est aussi rendre service à son pays, c'est participer à la gestion de la société. Le dernier terme que je vais éclaircir un petit peu, c'est l'utilisation, l'ethnicisme, l'instrumentalisation politique de l'ethnicité ou de l'ethnicisme. Cela se traduit dans certains pays parce que les partis politiques ne remplissent pas leur fonction de socialisation. Il y a des partis qui ne représentent absolument rien du tout. Il y a une seule personne, il n'y a que le nom. Regardez au Sénégal, il y a 173 partis politiques pour combien de millions d'habitants? 13 millions maximum. En Mauritanie, il y a 80 partis pour 3 millions d'habitants. Donc il y a des partis qui ne sont pas consistants. Et peut-être qu'on pourrait faire justement avec les élections l'évaluation. Il y a un parti qui n'atteint pas 5%. On la règle de paysage politique. Mais c'est un problème qui est en rapport avec l'évolution politique de ces États et aussi l'évaluation qu'on pourrait faire de l'action politique au niveau même de la représentation des hommes politiques dans le paysage politique mauritanien. Et j'en termine avec le professionnalisme. C'est que le professionnalisme viendra par rapport à l'évolution des situations. Parce que là, la France intervient dans la formation, il y a un aspect professionnel aussi, militaire, et ça va se poursuivre avec les Américains. Je pense que ça ne demande pas le temps. Merci, je vous remercie.
Merci, professeur. Léo. Alors, je passe la parole maintenant à monsieur, notre frère de Mauritanie. C'est la dernière intervention de cette session. Alors, je vous demande d'être très bref, très précis, si c'est possible.
D'accord,
Merci.
je risque de terminer. Le reste, les institutions institutionnelles sont restées telles que telles. Ça, c'est un. L'élection d'Aziz, ça n'a pas résolu le problème. On ne parle pas que c'est résolu, la crise politique existe toujours. Bon, la diplomatie du voisinage, ça a dit des effets, mais ce n'est pas complet. Les clauses de l'accord de Dakar n'ont pas été respectées. La raison, le dialogue, comme toujours. Tu vois, il y a un dialogue, ça veut dire que la crise existe toujours. Donc, ça c'est une observation. Bon, pour madame, les enfants. Vous avez parlé des enfants qui sont dans des centres de refuge. Bon, des enfants entourés. Et il y a des enfants qui sont dans la guerre. Est-ce qu'on n'a pas une idée de ces enfants-là, Libéria et tout ça, qui sont leurs préoccupations? C'est bon d'avoir des médecins pour avoir de l'idée, mais j'aimerais avoir l'impression des enfants en situation de guerre. Merci beaucoup.
Possibilité de parler, bientôt, je vous laisse vous parler après la conférence de Mme Rector. Je vais passer la parole à Mme Vieto pour vous répondre à la question sur les enfants, les orphelins. Merci. Soyez prêts.
C'est une précision. Il y a tellement de choses à faire avec les enfants dans les situations de conflit et de violence, mais dans ce projet-ci, c'était adressé spécifiquement à des enfants déplacés, réfugiés, qui ont été victimes ou même auteurs de violences dans les conflits qui secouent l'Afrique de l'Est. C'est-à-dire que ce n'était pas un travail avec des enfants qui sont en ce moment impliqués dans des conflits. C'était un groupe cible bien défini, bien déterminé. Parce que ce n'est pas un travail que j'ai fait écrire moi-même. Il fallait que je puisse identifier les enfants, puisse les regrouper quelque part, travailler avec eux, et donc en situation de conflit. Je pense que ce serait très difficile de dire à des enfants, venez, on va écrire. Donc j'ai choisi le groupe cible d'enfants victimes, auteurs, témoins de violences dans les conflits en Afrique de l'Est. Peut-être une prochaine fois, quand j'aurai mon gilet pare-balles, mon casque, et que je trouve une bourse, ça j'aimerais beaucoup, peut-être écrivain de guerre, aller travailler avec des enfants directement impliqués dans des conflits. Mais ici, ce n'était pas le cas. Mais c'est une excellente idée, ça aussi, c'est un autre travail à faire.
Qui avaient vécu la guerre.
Pardon?
Les enfants qui avaient vécu la guerre, les enfants victimes.
Oui, il y avait des enfants qui ont vécu la guerre. Oui, qui ont vécu la guerre. Oui.
Merci. Je pense qu'on est arrivé à la fin de cette session. Je vous remercie infiniment pour votre patience, aussi pour les intéressantes questions qu'on a mises et pour tous nous qui demain on va avoir notre journée de travail. Je vous remercie jusqu'à demain matin. Merci beaucoup.
And then we have an open discussion within the panel, also among the audience. So we'll try to make it very much an open discussion. We hope that people will actually acquire some skills and techniques on how to pursue academic publishing. So without much ado, let me just go through the presentation. Again, my name is Abuga. I'm the editor of the African Conflict and Peace Building Review. You should be receiving some flyers there, so please share it with your colleagues and others. And always feel free to send an email, and I'll be more than happy to help people get in touch with other journals, but also how to pursue more strategies. Okay? Thank you. Okay. So the first question here is simply to understand what is academic publishing. And the distinctions here academic versus non-academic publications. And for most of us here scholars, what we're interested in is in academic publications. So to help us get a sense of the distinctions, I think it is important to know that when we talk of academic publications, we're actually really talking of double-blind peer-reviewed works. Double-blind peer-reviewed works. That's the basic criteria. The basic idea behind academic publications. Now, what is double-blind peer review? Double-blind peer review is the principle of actually being anonymous in terms of who is submitting a paper and also who is reviewing the paper. In other words, when you submit a paper to a journal, the editor sends the paper to 2 or more reviewers. And in sending those papers or the paper, the names of the authors should not appear here. The reviewers will not know who the authors are. So that's one part of the plan. The other part of it also is that when the reviewers make their comments and send back the feedback to the editor sends you the comments, you will not know the name of the people who review the papers. Okay? So you will get the comments, but not their name or any identifying information. Okay? So it is double-blind in that sense. And the basic idea is that is to maintain integrity in academic knowledge. The idea is to eliminate bias. So we claim that academic knowledge is quote-unquote 100% accurate, it is scientific, so it has to be unbiased. Okay? So this is the key principle in academic publication. So when you think of places where you are published and how you go about it, you always ask the question, what is the review process? Is it double-blind? And that is the gold standard of academic publications. Okay? Academic publications typically comes in the forms of books and journal articles. Research articles published in academic journals. Okay? So it varies by discipline, but typically some disciplines have more of research articles in academic journals as compared to books. Others have more books as compared to academic journals, but all of them, of course, do have those two. Okay? So when you think of how you're going to publish your works, you want to ask the question, how can I transform this work into a book? How can I get an article or one or two from this work? Okay? Now, there are also chapters in books. In many cases, they are peer-reviewed. In some cases, they are not. But they are more what I call, it's a hybrid between research articles and books. They tend to be a little much more general than research articles, but a little much more focused than just a single book. And when you attend conferences, you will often get people who will suggest to you if you can take a paper and make it a good chapter. And it is okay, it is fine. The other thing I would suggest to you is that you want to have a very clear idea of how the the project has evolved before you commit your materials to somebody who just promised to get you a good chapter. But those are the things you publish. There are other academic publications that are not peer-reviewed. For example, reviews of books, commentaries, and other forms of essays. They are very good intellectual works, especially for people who are beginning in academic publishing. But again, the simple point for you to take away is that you should be targeting your works to be published, the research articles to be published in academic journals or in books. Okay? And they have to be peer-reviewed. The question of online versus traditional print kind of publication is it's an emerging and very important question. The way things look like going forward is that we will have more and more online publications in digital forms as compared to before. And I think what is also emerging is that the online publications are okay. That is an emerging trend. But I think what you need to do or look for is to make sure that they are peer-reviewed publications. So it is not so much whether it appears online in the digital form, but whether it is a process through which the journal or the book went through. So in fact, nearly all the journals now, actually most of the books too, they have both the print and electronic versions. Okay? So again, the criteria is for you to make sure it is peer reviewed as opposed to just saying, what it is not. So if somebody just puts something online without being peer reviewed, don't just go for that. Okay. The other question I want to put for you is, how do you identify appropriate outlets for your work? And by outlets, I mean, where will you publish your works? Journals and presses that will publish your book, like university press and so forth. So how do you identify those? And you want to, of course, identify good outlets. So as a rule of thumb, in the case of books, people who have manuscript for books, any university press typically passes the standards of what we qualify as academic publication. So if you see university presses, for example, in Oxford University Press, Cambridge University Press, and so forth, those things are Michigan State University, and so forth. They are actually non-profit academic publishers, not university presses, that are also that are academic presses. For example, Routledge, Catalan, and other presses, they are also okay. So the key point here is that you want to make sure that they follow peer review practices. Okay? And they are not, typically they shouldn't be for-profit organizations. They are non-profit, either university or non-university presses. One question, I guess, for you guys to think of when you say, well, where am I going to publish my works? I want you guys to actually think of it like this. Okay? Ask yourself, what is your career dream as an academic? What is your career dream? Who do you want to be like? Maybe you want to be like Professor Baichan, Professor Villanon. You want to be like Mahmoud Mamdani? Who do you want to be? Look for the professor that you know and ask, who do you want to be like? Okay? And they can be professors from your local universities, they can be renowned international scholars, and it's good to dream big. Okay? So, but ask yourself, who do you want to be like? And the next part of our process will be, well, try to publish in the places where the people that you want to be like publish their work. Okay? So if Professor Villanon is publishing with University of Press, then try to publish it. If he's publishing in, let's say, for example, African Studies Review, try to publish them and so forth. I think it gives you a simple way to actually think where is actually recognized reputable academic places. Okay? Now, some people have had a long academic career, they have published for 10, 15 years. Some of the places may not be there, but I think you can look at their current publications. And also because of their long track record and caliber and so forth, you may not be able to publish immediately where they publish at the moment, but I think it should be the places where you aspire to publish. Now, when you look for publication, also look for publication outlets in the works that you read. So when you do your work, when you write the papers, you use references, okay? And then take the works that you like. Go to look who published the work, in which journal or in which press. And the idea is that those will be the presses that will actually be much more open and similar to what you do. Okay? So, for example, if you use X's book published by Express, well, you should be targeting that particular outlet as a possible place for your own publications. One of the good things about the internet these days is all the information that you need from any journal or any press is online. And I really strongly encourage you guys to go to the webpage of the journal or to the press and read what they write, because they are very good in actually putting what they want. Look for the mission. All journals, all presses have a statement about what kind of work they publish. Typically, it's a mission. Okay? And it's a very broad statement, but I think if you look at it very carefully, you can tell whether your work actually will fit or not. Okay? So look at the mission. Number two, look at the works that they publish, the journal or the press. The table of contents are always available online. You can look at them and you can see how your work fits up with that. And of course, read the submission guidelines. All of them have elaborate, detailed submission guidelines. Follow them exactly. The more you can actually make, the work of the editor simple, the more the editor is likely to like you. So and you want to do that, okay? So follow the submission guidelines is very simple. Word count, style, and those sorts of simple things. Who to send it to and so forth, and do those things. Okay? Remember, when you're a junior scholar, you actually you want to be more a person who actually follow the tricks so that you can get a foot in there. Later on, you can behave badly if you want to. Okay? Now, so you don't just want to publish anywhere, but of course you want to have publications in reputable outlets, in reputable journals, and with reputable presses. Okay? And part of the question is, well, how do you identify it? How do you know which ones are highly reputable, versus which ones are not? Now, keep in mind, again, we're talking about peer review. All of them have to be peer-reviewed press journals or presses. But within that, of course, there's a range, and your goal should be again to shoot high, to publish in the best of all possible. So how do you know which ones are the best? Okay? And so some basic term of the rule of thumb, any university press for junior scholar, I think, is good. If you can get your work published by a university press in the US or Britain and other places too, I think that is good for a junior scholar. Now, among university presses, there are ranges too, but at this point, I would just say university press should be considered to be very good for junior scholars. Number two, again, look for not-for-profit academic presses with long track record of academic publishing. Okay? So there are actually some very good non-university presses. But you want to make sure that it's not, you look at the track record, how long they've been out there. And there are some very good ones. So I think, Catalan, Routledge, Lexington Books, and others all will fit this criteria, for a junior scholar. In the case of journals, again, how do you tell the reputation? Again, there are multiple indicators of reputation or standing of the journal. Okay? One thing to look for is, of course, it's a peer review, and you check that off. Yes. Number two, look whether the journal is actually is listed in an abstract or an index. Okay? Now, what is that? Abstract or index? Typically, what that means is that libraries. Okay? If you go to libraries, I don't know what kind of access to libraries you have, but in the libraries, when you search for books or when you search for journals, they have a database. And typically, journals that are actually listed in an abstract will show those things. For example, sociological abstract. Political science abstract, and there's a lot of abstract. But the point is that the index and abstract is the way in which journals will make themselves visible to the wider academic world. And it takes journals a while, 2-3 years to actually get into an abstract. So when the journal begins, it doesn't just get into abstract. And look for journals that have a lot of that are listed in many kinds of abstract. Okay? So that's a very important indication of quality. Look for journals that are publishing regularly. That is to say, they don't miss an issue. Issue 1, volume 1, issue 1, issue 2, 3, the next volume 1, 2, 3. It is consistent. That is to say, they don't skip issues. If you find a journal that they publishing what they should be publishing in 2010, let's say in 2012, it shows a lot of gaps. So you want to have consistency. Look for journals that are affiliated with an organization. For example, the official journal of the African Studies Association, the official journal of the West African Research Association, and so forth. That brings a lot of credibility and reputation to the journal. Okay? And look, of course, the people who are on the board, and if there's a ranking for the journal, is the ISI ranking. For example, African years is listed in the ranking. It's number one in African studies, number 2 in area studies, number 10 in political science, and so forth. My point really is that you shouldn't look for all of these things in a single journal. Okay? It will be the top journal to have all these things, but at least make sure that it has some of these things. Okay? So that would be my indication of quality. I would also suggest that you keep a list of journals and presses and rank them for yourself. So based on the kinds of reading that you do, based on the people that you want to be like, make a list for yourself. 10 journals, 15 journals, or 5, 7 presses, and rank them. Our one hour can publish here first, second, third, and so forth. So keep that list for yourself. So when you have the work, you don't say, well, where am I going to send this work? No, when you have the work, I know where I'm going to send it because I have my list. It's going to be in this place and so forth. Okay? So that is the trick in terms of how you get know where to actually submit your work. Let me just show you a quick PDF here. I don't know whether you can actually see everything here, but okay, this is just a page that I copied from ACP, our journal here. It shows you the submission guidelines. Again, it's all on the web, but you can see the submission guidelines. If you scroll down, it will show you everything about the submission guidelines. Let me show you one other thing here. This is African Affairs. Again, it's pretty much now. Let me give you some tips, okay? Some little tricks to keep in the pocket. Okay? One. Begin by submitting to the highest ranked journal in your area. That is to say, in your industry. You make your list for yourself. When you have a paper, don't go to the bottom one. Always shoot for the highest, the best journal, the best press. Because if you get rejected here, then you go to number 2. If you begin at the bottom, they accept you have actually lost some chances of actually being in the highest journals. Okay? So it is always a good trick to actually begin first at the highest ranked journal or press that you want. You submit the affairs. Most likely they're going to reject you. Then you go to number 2, and so far and so forth. Okay? In your cover note, I think it's important that for those, you mentioned that you are a scholar that is based in Africa, especially if you're submitting to European or American journals. I say this because I think many people actually want to read about Africa through the lens of people who live and work in Africa. Okay? And if they can get good quality work, they will be more than happy to publish it. So I think it is always important that you let them know that. I mean, they won't publish your paper simply because you live in Africa. But if it is sufficiently good, that can actually make an advantage in terms of whether to give the space or not. Typically, in many cases, when you send a paper to editor, they will hold it for 6, 7 months, 8 months, you won't hear anything. I consider that to be a little bit bad. So my rule of thumb is that it takes, on average, about 3 to 4 months for people to get reviewers to review a paper. So I would suggest that if you send a paper out, after 4 months, if you don't hear anything from the editor, send it a very nice reminder that, no, just ask about what is the state of the paper, okay? And keep on doing that every 2 months until you hear something. But I would, if it takes 1 year, you have to do that organization, I would actually tell them, please, I'm actually, put it like this, with due respect, I would like to withdraw my paper. Be nice, always nice. It is always good to be nice in academia, okay? But you can tell them that if you don't get a response within 1 month, you can withdraw it. And I think, it's one year should be enough. Okay? And if that is the case, you try. When you get reviews, when you submit a paper, you get reviews. Look at the reviews as an asset. Okay? Reviews are always, they tend to be always bad for everybody. Okay? But look at them as an asset. Some reviewers, don't say things that doesn't make any sense. Some of them actually give you like some very good ideas. So I suggest that you actually read the reviews with open mind and try to take as much as you can from them. Okay? The more you can take from the reviewers, the better it is. Now, if they ask you to revise and resubmit a paper, that's a very good advantage. It is hardly the case that you will submit a paper and they accept it without revision or revise and resubmit. So don't expect your paper to just be accepted like that. But if you get R&R, revise and resubmit, that is very good. And in that case, I would actually suggest that you do everything, all the corrections that the editor asks. If they ask for 10 things, do everything. Okay? Because it is R&R. So, and when you do the revisions, I would also suggest that you ask someone to read the revised paper that you made and then give them the comments so that the person can say, well, you did everything that they asked you to do. Okay? Because you want to make sure that you really, if they say do this, do it. And a second opinion can actually tell you whether you have actually done it or not. Okay? Now, if the paper is rejected, which most likely it will be, then of course you go to the next journal or press in your list, and you follow the same kind of process. Okay? But of course, read first the reviews from the old journal, and don't just take the journal or the paper from the old place that you submitted and send it somewhere else. Read the reviews and see. Try to take as much from the reviews as you can. You don't have to take everything if it is not an R&R, because some reviews will not make sense. But try to see, take every idea that you think will be helpful and revise the paper, then it's a better paper, and then you go to the next job. Okay? Make sure that, again, one other trick is that make sure that you're sending your work to the right job. Getting your work published in many times it's about quality of work, but also it's about fit. If you send your work to a journal that doesn't fit what you're doing, most likely they will say it's a good work, but it doesn't fit. So it is important that you find the right outlet of quality. And again, that's why I mentioned the links. Okay? So send your work to, make sure that you send your work to journals and presses that fit your, again, read the mission statements and see what they are published. I think it's important to also know, you should know that the process of academic publishing is a fairly honest, tough, critical, and competitive process. Okay? I think, I honestly think that it is honest. I don't think, you can get people to get your papers published just like that. I think it is an honest process, but of course it is a tough one. It's very tough. And the more you go to better journals, the more tough it is. And I think it's critical. That's what we do academics. We criticize everything. Okay, that's what we do. And of course, it is competitive. The more you go up, 100 people want to publish in African affairs in this issue. They can only publish 7 articles. Okay, so it is a competitive process. Okay? And finally, it's always important in whatever you do, but also in academia in particular, to maintain integrity in your work. And by that, I mean, give credit to people when you use their work. Make sure that your data is as reliable as you are, as you can. Don't make up data and those sorts of things. I think integrity is very important because in academia, if you actually caught cheating once, most likely you won't be able to go to that particular outlet anymore. So integrity, I think, it's very important in doing this kind of work. And I think that's it. Thank you very much. And so we'll actually, I guess, get the other people here to make some quick comments, and then of course we'll open the discussion. Hopefully, we can have a lot of questions and answers here because again, this is supposed to be about helping people know how to get their work published.
I made I made some notes for myself of some things I might want to say, and Abu touched on every one of them, and much better than I would have. And in the spirit of, I think, making sure we have time for discussion, I'll pass right now then. I'm going to give Fatkine perhaps the la parole, because she's going to talk about perhaps from a slightly different perspective, and then we can go on to you two.
Merci. Je pense que M. Ba a vraiment donné tous les détails pour une publication dans des revues anglophones. Je pense maintenant qu'il faut appliquer les mêmes recettes entre guillemets qu'il a données pour ceux qui écrivent en français et qui voudraient publier dans des revues francophones. Et je pense aussi, moi je suis enseignante, professeur, donc je sais que dans notre métier c'est publish or perish, il faut absolument publier. Mais je suis aussi militante des droits de la personne humaine dans les associations. Et mon autre préoccupation, c'est évidemment ma carrière, mais aussi que le résultat de nos recherches soit accessible à la population. Que ça ne reste pas juste dans les milieux académiques. Et c'est la raison pour laquelle j'étais très intéressée par la proposition qu'a faite Simon Kassi-Aka, le comédien. Comment est-ce qu'on peut faire sous forme de bande dessinée, mettre sous forme de bande dessinée le résultat de ces recherches, et aussi l'écrivaine Ken Bukul, avec le travail avec les enfants, comment faire peut-être des exposer les dessins, et puis enfin je vais terminer là, WARC a un site web, site internet, qui est très bien, et je pense que ce serait bien que tous les articles qui ont été écrits, les recherches qui ont été faites pour cette conférence soient publiés sur le site, avec évidemment la mention que c'est, on peut dire, un draft, une sorte de brouillon, en anglais on dit work in progress, parce qu'on attend peut-être que la personne va retravailler en fonction des observations critiques qu'il va recevoir, mais c'est très important, je trouve, que ce travail-là soit publié dès maintenant, dans l'état où il est, quitte à ce que les auteurs reprennent ce travail s'il le faut pour l'envoyer à des revues spécialisées. Voilà, c'est ce que je veux dire. Merci Léo.
Merci Patrick. Vous voulez dire quelque chose?
Not really. I think everything has already been covered. But just to say that when you get rejected, don't take it personally. I mean, we all went through that process of having 5, 6, 7 papers rejected. I mean, attempts to submit in a journal get rejected. But I mean, just look at it. I mean, the African American motivational speakers say that, I mean, every setback is a setup for a comeback. So I mean, if you look at it that way and really follow the advice that Abu gave us in terms of looking very seriously at these comments that are made and taking them very seriously into consideration, to incorporate them in any revised versions, then that will really increase your chances of getting your work published. I think another aspect that is quite important, getting up to that process of submission, is really working in groups, networking among yourselves. Because I think sometimes peer reviews, peer sort of feedback becomes very, very important in putting some of those basic things together, and then going on to the next step of appealing maybe to professors or other professionals that can also help you, guide you, give you feedback, and so on and so forth. So I think those are all parts and parcel of the trade. But for me, the most important thing is really not to get discouraged when you get your paper rejected 2, 3, 4 times. Keep going.
I think everything has been so excellent. There's only one thing that I could think of that might be valuable, and that is to remember that your voice can make a valuable contribution to the dialogue among scholars. And I think that Abu Bakr hit on that some. You shouldn't underestimate the value of the data that you are bringing, and stick with your subject, because maybe there are not many people writing about it. So that many people may be very excited about what you have to contribute. And it's important to see yourself in a dialogue with other scholars who are talking about similar subjects. So it may be that your voice is really needed in that dialogue, and should keep trying to fight to present your views so that others can benefit from what you're thinking about, and you push the discussion forward, because it may be your point of view or your subject that's going to push the discussion forward.
Let me just make one more point which I forgot to mention. But so some of us, write in French and others in English, and the outlets on both sides. So some in Portuguese. Oh yeah, we took up, right? Okay. Yeah, but I think one way you can actually try to overcome these language difficulties is to, when you go to conferences, try to make friends across the other language. They can help you translate your papers, or even go further. If you have a very advanced project that you want to try, let's say, an outlet in a different language, get one of your friends involved and make it a collaborative paper. He can do a lot of translation, put in some ideas there, and then you have a chance of submitting to a French journal or to Portuguese journal or an English journal. So again, that are just practical things that you can actually do, because journals typically will not translate a paper for you. It just costs too much money. So you have to get it translated by yourself, and I think your colleagues can actually help you do that.
So if I could add just one thing, je parle en français, pour ajouter juste un petit mot à ce que vient de dire. La question de langue et de publication, je crois que c'est très important d'essayer d'encourager nos collègues francophones de publier dans les revues anglophones, et peut-être l'inverse aussi, c'est important. Mais il y a quand même une barrière assez importante. Assez souvent, comme je m'intéresse à l'Afrique francophone, assez souvent je suis appelé pour faire le peer review, comme il dit, c'est-à-dire de faire une expertisation des papiers qui touchent à l'Afrique francophone. Et dès que je reçois des papiers, je vois tout de suite que c'est un papier qui a été écrit par un francophone où l'anglais n'est pas suffisamment fort. C'est-à-dire, ça se voit tout de suite. Et moi, personnellement, je fais beaucoup d'efforts pour essayer de voir s'il y a une idée derrière ça qui est très intéressante, qu'il faudrait encourager. Mais j'avoue que même moi, parfois je dis, bon écoutez, je crois qu'il y a une idée là, mais ça demande tellement de travail et je ne suis pas à mesure moi-même en tant qu'expert. Je donne une moitié d'une journée pour faire une expertisation, mais je ne peux pas passer quelques jours à réécrire le papier. Donc je dis à l'éditeur, écoutez, il faudrait refaire le papier avec le meilleur anglais. Et donc, ça veut dire que c'est très important. On vous encourage, mais il faut absolument que vous ayez un anglophone qui lise le papier, qui corrige bien le papier, avant de soumettre un papier que vous avez rédigé d'abord en français ou que vous avez traduit vous-même dans une revue anglophone. Parce que malheureusement, ça provoque. C'est vraiment dommage quand il y a des idées de la recherche très importantes et un peu perdues à cause des questions de langue. Donc, je suis juste pour souligner l'importance de cette question. Voilà, je crois qu'on pourrait parler de complications.
Thank you very much, French and English. And if we put Portuguese, it would be much more complicated. But we have to do it. That is my first point. My second point is for asking to Abu, who is doing a very, very nice job and made a very interesting presentation. I'm very sorry I don't have a lot of young researchers in this room to look and to listen to, because this is a very important point when we are thinking about a scientific culture, about research. We have to have peer review, we have to have the ability to be published in journals and press with enough reputation and so on. But my question is, how do you deal with the papers which have been written for degree, to have a degree, a master degree or a PhD or a PhD, you assume that they are reviewed or not. In that case, all universities or high institutes are the same, or you make a difference among them. Did you get my point? Okay, one. Second, how important, I got a kind of anticipation from Leonard, talking about papers which have been written in French to be published or by French-speaking to be published in English journals or press. But my point is, how important is for you working in this project, African Peace Building, how important is the issue of language? I mean, might AI write and be published in ACP or ACPR or not? Given the case that I'm a Portuguese speaking, and just a third one to finish. Kiné a parlé de la nécessité de maintenir, de développer le dialogue entre ceux qui recherchent, publient et les communautés. C'est un point très important. Mais Kim, est-ce que vous pensez que la qualité, la haute qualité est compatible avec la simplicité? Parce que moi, je pense qu'en cette matière, il n'y a pas de concession à faire. Ou bien l'article vaut être publié ou ne vaut pas. Les reviewers ne laisseront pas passer. Mais je crois que la rigueur, la qualité est parfaitement compatible avec la simplicité du langage, avec la communication efficace. Qu'est-ce que vous en pensez? Merci.
On a un cas d'école. On a une assemblée, on va en discuter de toute façon le dernier jour. Mais on a une assemblée, vous avez des chercheurs de type traditionnel qui ont fait du travail, qui ont présenté leur travail. Vous avez des journalistes qui vont présenter leur travail, qui ont eu une très maigre initiation à la recherche universitaire, à la recherche académique, mais qui en même temps ont soif maintenant d'aller plus loin, en se disant on a découvert quelque chose, c'est quelque chose qui nous intéresse, c'est quelque chose qui va nous aider dans notre travail justement de traducteur. Mais en même temps, on a envie d'en savoir plus au niveau du monde académique. Donc éventuellement, d'avoir accès à des masters, d'avoir accès à des PhD. Et donc, ce que je veux dire par là, c'est super ce que vous nous avez dit, vraiment magnifique. Mais on en voudrait plus. On voudrait des universitaires qui soient capables de se lier avec des jeunes et des moins jeunes qui veulent apporter quelque chose à leur pays. C'est-à-dire qui à la fois veulent faire ce travail de publication de qualité dans la simplicité de leur langage, mais en même temps de gens qui soient capables aussi d'être des agents de transformation. Peut-être que les chercheurs sont trop loin pour le faire, je ne sais pas. Je pense que les chercheurs ne devraient pas être trop loin pour le faire. Mais je crois que ça peut être un exemple intéressant, une idée intéressante à poursuivre, de regarder comment effectivement il peut y avoir une combinaison de publications, de chercheurs confirmés, etc., mais en même temps de personnes qui sont plus dans la pratique, et je pense que c'est le sens de nos réformes au niveau de l'université. Sur la question de la langue, moi j'ai toujours regretté, justement en termes de collaboration, on a plein de personnes, d'abord simplement les anglophones. Vous êtes aux États-Unis. En quoi vous êtes capable d'apporter aux jeunes universitaires africains anglophones ces capacités-là pour leur permettre d'aller loin en termes de publication et même les travaux qu'ils ont faits, qu'ils soient connus, etc. Je pense dans le dialogue, c'est quelque chose d'important, mais en même temps, ça leur permet eux-mêmes d'aller plus loin au niveau universitaire. Au niveau des francophones, il y a plein d'universitaires francophones qui ont fait leur chemin aux États-Unis. Je sais qu'il y a des programmes, mais malheureusement, ces programmes ne se traduisent pas de manière concrète. Donc voilà, moi je voudrais nous emmener dans une réflexion beaucoup. On parle des pays de langue portugaise, etc. Je voudrais une réflexion qui nous mène beaucoup plus loin. Que cette question des publications soit un prétexte pour nous poser la question, mais qu'est-ce qu'on fait avec l'Afrique? Particulièrement, nous qui venons de l'Afrique. Que fait-on avec l'Afrique, avec la recherche en Afrique? On est dans une situation difficile. Les universités sont en train de s'effondrer à l'heure actuelle. Donc il y a une vraie réflexion à avoir. Voilà.
I worked on was with a community organization. And one of the things that I confronted was stratified and hierarchical ideas about what communities should or should not know. And so I suggest that a review of action research practices is very useful, and also alliances with community organizations, not necessarily an NGO, even a community association. In response to what was said earlier about if something is good enough to publish, I actually had a research subject that I worked up to the level of submitting to an academic press, but for which I also produced a small, what can I say, leaflet or brochure for community use, because people in the community were invested in the subject. So I really appreciate your observation, and I think there are ways that aspiring scholars or journalists can look at the same material in diverse ways and not feel that they are limited one way or the other, but more it's a question of how they would apply their levels of effort and organize their time.
Thank you very much.
No, just you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, okay. Yeah, actually a lot of very interesting questions have been raised, I think very important, and I will try to hit at all of them briefly. I think the question as to whether African universities produce the kind of talents, or whether there should also be emphasis on applied and community kind of work as opposed to academic. I think this is very important. But I think what we should keep in mind is that the intent or the focus here is to actually give people the tools to do academic publishing. That doesn't negate other forms of publishing, but if people actually want to put in academia, they will have to do academic publishing. The other point also that is tied to that is that we should keep in mind, at least the way I understand it, universities are not supposed to make everybody when go to university a scholar. Very few people are supposed to be scholars. Universities are supposed to train people in all sorts of things. So the goal of the university here shouldn't be to make every student a scholar, who will publish in academic scholars, in journals. But rather, for those few who will be interested in that, going to get their PhD, then this is what they should be doing. And but I think on the wider question really here is about what is the relation between academic work and policy and the people. And I think that is the underlying question. And you get me excited because African ACPR, the journal is actually framed around that in particular. The journal is framed as a journal that actually provides that allows for multiple. It provides a forum for multiple forms of discourses. So in the journal we have three kinds of work. One of them is research articles, and what I just spoke about here is for scholars who want to do peer-reviewed journal article, research articles. So one section of the journal is simply for academic works. But the other two sections of the journal, one is the briefing sections in which we actually publish works from practitioners. We actually like works that deal with policy issues. So they don't have to they are not scholarly works, but of course they will also go through some peer review, and they are not actually reviewed as academic articles, but rather as policy papers. So again, that is an effort to bridge academia and policy. And we have a third category of multimedia, which is actually for people of artistic background. So for example, we publish photo essays, like people can actually document peace and conflict through photographs with text. We do have more videos and audio presentations, and we publish those things. So the idea of the journal was to actually create a forum where you will have what I call public intellectuals, policy makers and practitioners, and scholars have a single forum where they can actually discuss African peace and conflict. So I think we do share that sentiment of actually bridging academia with actually the real world as a young students in class. Corentin raised some very important questions, and I think I recall then. So one of the questions was about degree projects, master's thesis, and doctoral projects. Right? Is that correct? Yeah. So in the US, I mean, the typical model for PhD, especially for PhD works, is that by the time you finish with PhD, you should have tried to take 2 or 3 pieces out of it and turn it into an article. So the model is actually one in which your thesis, most of the doctoral level, becomes the basis for actual articles. But I think what doesn't work is to simply take a chapter here and think of it as an article. But what I mean is about picking one idea, one set of ideas, one set of data, and actually transforming that into an article. So I mean, that's the way it is most useful. In the old days, I believe people, when they finish their PhDs with a dissertation, they simply try to turn the dissertation into a book very quickly. That is the old model. The new model now, as I understand it from publishers, they don't typically publish a dissertation as it is. They actually want a significant revision, and the publisher told me there's a simple reason. That is, at least dissertations in the United States are available electronically to anybody, through the library. So you have a dissertation, it's available. So a press will say, well, why should I make this into a book when somebody can just pull the electronic copy from the library? So the strategy, if you have a dissertation, is to actually think very quickly how do you convince people that, well, this is not a dissertation anymore. And you have to convince them, well, you have to get a strategy to convince them. That is it. And now for people whose dissertation in Africa that may not apply because they don't have a record of a dissertation. But at least the old format of the dissertation, literature review, a lot of literature review and so forth, doesn't fit the book model. So you have to revise in a lot of ways. I think those were your questions. Was that correct? Oh, yeah. The question of language, so when we established ACPR, one of the challenges that we really faced was that we could only publish in English. And here's the reason. As I said before, it costs a lot for the press to translate in English. So if you're in the United States, you want to pay somebody to translate a paper, it's going to cost a lot of money, which the press doesn't actually want to deal with. So as a practical reason, I think the advice that we're giving here is really to work with your colleagues, the friends that you make in these conferences, as either collaborators or somebody that's going to help you. But I think the collaboration model is what I would prefer more, because if I call, hey John, can you translate this 30-page paper for me? Well, John has a lot of other things to do. You know what I mean? But I think if John can bring some ideas into the paper and then translate what you have here, I think it is legitimate, and you can also claim that it is joint work with integrity. I mean, joint work doesn't mean 50-50. Sometimes in what we call collaborative work, somebody did one in a small thing or somebody did more. But I think the best way to get that is really to get your colleague from the other language get involved as collaborators, so that the project becomes your project But I think you have to know the people, you have to have the work ethics. But I think that is the best. It is difficult really for you just to send a journal, a manuscript to a journal and expect them to translate that into another language. That is going to be very, very difficult. For financial reasons.
Thank you. Maybe I could just just add one or two brief comments and then we'll get one. We can have one more question. Okay. Just add very briefly one or two comments to that in the spirit. I do want to underline what Abu said, and especially thinking about Abu's comments, that this was done in the spirit of thinking about academic publishing within the existing paradigm of universities and research publication and research careers. A couple of comments within that. On the question of language, if I can just underline, my center, I directed the Center for African Studies at the University of Florida for many years until August. And we have an online journal called the African Studies Quarterly. You can look it up. When I arrived, I was editing it and I said, I want to publish in English and French, exactly to open the door. And we were only able to do that for a very limited time, for a very few papers, because it was extremely difficult to have the peer review process, to find people who could expertise, right, who could peer review a paper in French, who knew the model and who would know how to give us the response and who would communicate. Our editorial assistant couldn't do it, so I had to do it. And so I had to, in terms of communicating with the author and communicating with the editors, because they didn't speak French. And then we had the question of the copy editing, that is the actual correction. So it's extremely difficult, unfortunately. One small suggestion for those of you who would like to publish in French, unfortunately I don't think in Portuguese, but in North American journals, with a reasonable respect, is to look at the Canadian journals. The Canadian Journal of African Studies, for example, and other Canadian journals, almost all of them publish bilingually in English and French. And so it's one possibility, that's one suggestion. One comment about the question about theses and dissertations, I think Abu responded very well. In the North American model, most people's first publications do come from the thesis or the dissertation. But as I said, they have to be worked to be an article, a real article, not a chapter, and a book, not a dissertation. It builds on it and then addresses that issue. It's perfectly acceptable in journal articles, journal editors frequently welcome work that comes from the thesis because they know it's very good work, it's been reviewed and committees have read it and the person has defended it, they welcome it, but the form, and I think that's very important, that the form conform to an article. And one other just small caveat that comes, the other thing that I think journal editors see a lot is not only chapters that the form doesn't conform, consultants' reports, right? And I think that's especially true frequently of our African colleagues who get asked to consult and to write a consultant report that arrives at a journal and it is very easily recognized as consultants' reports because it doesn't have the same form. And sometimes the ideas are good, but it's very hard to get that published. So again, I would encourage those of you who do consulting to think about using the data, but you have to rework it. You have to rework it in some ways. And I'd like to just add, I think the questions that I think you raised to some extent, but especially Professor Au raised, are extremely important ones for which I have no answer. But they're really questions about the purpose of universities, about what universities reward and what they should reward, what kinds of work should be encouraged, to what extent the university is science for science sake, or to what extent it is science to do something concrete and good in the world. And I don't know the answers, but I would say that in the United States right now, that debate is happening because of the financial crisis, and public education is being forced to rethink it. In Africa, your financial crisis is longer and deeper, and I think African universities, it's an extremely important question to ask, right? And unfortunately, in many ways, that sometimes, in some ways, we may contribute by suggesting this North American model should be followed. Maybe it's an injustice, maybe that's not what they should do. The dilemma is the one Madame Al referred to. There are many, I know many young Senegalese, I tease some of my Senegalese colleagues to say Columbia University in New York has become the Senegalese University in exile, right? With the Mamadou Dioufs and Bachir Diagnous and everybody who's there. And so, unfortunately, to the extent that we want to be academics at the global level, there is a set of expectations that sometimes are not what necessarily is needed at the local level. And I think that's a dilemma that each of us has to face sometimes. Thank you. Do we have maybe time for one more question? I was reminded that our translators have gone a little too long. We had one. Should we stop or should I? One. If the translators would be so kind as to allow us one more question. Thank you.
Okay, my question is this. You know, when you send an article to a journal, the editor will ask whether the article is being reviewed by another. To give them a period of 3 months within which they will get back to you. In some cases, they never get back to you. If it is codextual, if you write them from now till Jesus comes, they will never respond to you. Now, some other journals, they will respond, but much later. Now, how do you deal with that situation? But from my own experience, what I do, and I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but what I do is that I give 3 months after the first 3 months, and if nothing happens, I'll send to another journal. Thank you.
Journals that keep articles for a very long time, we always complain. The expectation and the model in the North American context is exactly what you said, that you should not send an article to 2 journals. And if journals ask you, have you sent it to another one? And if you do, and they know that you sent it to another one, they will ban you from submitting later. So I tell my students, never submit an article to 2 journals. If you have the problem you had, I think Abu had a suggestion. You write to the journal and say, if you cannot answer me within a month, I would like to withdraw my article from consideration because I have a career. I want to publish this, so I will go to another journal, but you withdraw it. So again, this is speaking in the American context, the North American context. It is very important not to submit an article to 2 journals. And I can explain from the perspective of an editor, I think the logic, it is that it is a lot of work to ask people to do peer review, right? And peer review is a lot of work which is not paid and voluntary. And journal editors are very careful not to abuse of their good peer reviewers. And so typically they ask 2, maybe 3 people. And if you have it in 2 journals, that means 4 or 6. And if you have it in 3, that means 6 or 9 have been asked to review the article. That's many people reading an article for one person, which will only be published in one place. And so editors would be very embarrassed to ask someone to read an article. They say, yes, it's very good, publish it. They say, I want to publish it. You say, oh, I already published it somewhere else. They would be very unhappy. So that's the logic. Now, that said, the other rule, which is arbitrary, but it's the North American rule, is it is acceptable to send books to multiple publishers. But you usually tell them. You send book if you're asking to consider it. Yeah, that's acceptable.
Very briefly. Okay, I think the issue really is a professional ethics question, and Neil actually said it very right. So the practical question to you is that when you send, so let's say you're tired and you want to withdraw it, you send the email that I'm withdrawing it, and even if they don't reply to you, you keep the record that you have actually told them, because you mentioned the scenario in which they won't reply you, but keep the record that you have actually sent them an email that you have withdrawn. I think then it becomes acceptable. The issue of how long. So if you send one article to more than 3 journals, and if you do that often, you're going to be caught, because here's the reason. There are very small pool of reviewers. Most likely, the people who land at the desk of the same person from the 2 journals, and they catch you and they will blacklist you from both of them, so you don't want to do that.
Okay, I want to thank Abu for having organized this and for his initiative. I want to thank him for this initiative, for this journal, which I think is extremely important for our occupation, for things that concern us here, and for his leadership and for having done this. And then, if I may, I want to thank everybody, all the participants again, and since we are really abused of our translators, maybe I could ask you all in joining in a round of applause for the translators.